17 Golden Age stars who played other races they weren't. Did you know that Katharine Hepburn, yes, the aristocratic New England icon herself, once played a Chinese peasant woman? Or that John Wayne, the quintessential American cowboy, portrayed Genghis Khan with his unmistakable Western drawl intact? Hollywood has a shocking secret hiding in plain sight. For decades, some of our most beloved stars built their legendary careers by literally changing their race on screen. And the most disturbing part? They were celebrated, awarded, and immortalized for it. But here's what might surprise you even more. Many of these performances weren't hidden in obscure B-movies or forgotten flops. They appeared in some of the most acclaimed, award-winning films in history. And while today we recognize how problematic these portrayals were, there's an uncomfortable truth we need to confront. Some of these cross-racial performances were actually intended to be progressive for their time. The very same films that sought to humanize characters of different cultures simultaneously denied authentic actors the opportunity to portray their own stories. And that contradiction reveals something profound about America's complicated relationship with race that continues to echo today. So what happens when we pull back the curtain on Hollywood's most celebrated stars and examine the racial masquerades that helped build their legendary careers? Let's explore 17 shocking examples that will transform how you see classic cinema forever. 1. Mickey Rooney as Mr. Yunyoshi. When we think of Breakfast at Tiffany's, most of us immediately picture Audrey Hepburn's elegant Holly Golightly with her upswept hair and long cigarette holder. But lurking in this beloved classic is one of the most cringe-inducing racial caricatures ever committed to film. Mickey Rooney as Mr. Yunyoshi, with taped eyelids, buck teeth, and an exaggerated accent. Rooney's portrayal of Holly's Japanese landlord was intended as comic relief. The performance is so jarringly offensive that modern screenings of the film often come with disclaimers, and some viewers choose to fast forward through his scenes entirely. What makes this example particularly revealing is its timing. Breakfast at Tiffany's was released in 1961, just 16 years after the end of Japanese internment in America. While thousands of Japanese Americans were still rebuilding lives shattered by wartime incarceration, Hollywood was treating their identity as a punchline. Rooney himself later expressed contradictory feelings about the role. For decades, he defended it as harmless comedy, but in his later years admitted, "I wouldn't have done it if I'd known people would be so offended." This shift mirrors America's evolving understanding of what constitutes acceptable representation. Director Blake Edwards eventually called the character a terrible mistake, acknowledging that what seemed acceptable in 1961 had become obviously problematic with the passage of time. But the damage was done. For generations of viewers, Mr. Yunyoshi became a template for mocking Asian identity, packaged in one of cinema's most cherished classics. 2. Katharine Hepburn as Jade in Dragon Seed. Can you picture Katharine Hepburn, the epitome of Yankee sophistication, as a Chinese peasant woman fighting against Japanese occupation? In 1944's Dragon Seed, audiences didn't have to imagine it. They watched as Hepburn, with taped eyelids and darkened skin, attempted to portray Jade, a rural Chinese woman caught in the turmoil of war. The results were as incongruous as they sound. Hepburn's distinctive Connecticut accent repeatedly broke through her attempts at sounding Chinese. Her angular, aristocratic features, despite the makeup department's best efforts, never convincingly transformed. Yet this wasn't some low-budget curiosity. This was a major MGM production, adapted from a best-selling novel by Pearl S. Buck, who had won the Nobel Prize for her depictions of Chinese rural life. The film was intended as wartime propaganda, designed to build American sympathy for Chinese allies during World War II. In that sense, it was meant to be respectful and humanizing. Yet even as it condemned Japanese aggression against China, it perpetuated its own form of cultural appropriation by denying Chinese actors the opportunity to portray their own experiences. Pearl S. Buck herself advocated for authentic casting, arguing that Chinese actors should play the leading roles. The studio ignored her pleas, demonstrating how even voices with considerable influence couldn't overcome Hollywood's entrenched practices. The irony becomes even more striking when you consider the film's plot. A story about Chinese resistance against foreign invaders was itself a form of cultural invasion, with American actors claiming the right to tell Chinese stories through their own distorted lens. 3. Marlon Brando as Sakini in The Tea House of the August Moon. Marlon Brando is remembered as one of the greatest actors in American history, revolutionizing performance with his raw, emotional authenticity. Yet in 1956, This icon of method acting appeared in the tea house of the August Moon as Sakini, an Okinawan interpreter, complete with bronze skin, altered eye shape, and a performance that today would be considered a racial caricature. The contradiction is striking. Brando, who would later become known for his political activism and support of civil rights causes, apparently saw no issue with taking a role that would have been perfect for an Asian actor. This wasn't an early career misstep either. Brando had already won an Academy Award for On the Waterfront and was at the height of his powers. What makes this example particularly revealing is Brando's later political evolution. In 1973, he famously declined his Oscar for The Godfather and sent Native American activist Sachin Littlefeather to speak about Hollywood's misrepresentation of Native Americans. Yet just 17 years earlier, he had participated in the very practices he would later condemn. This transformation reflects a broader awakening in American consciousness about racial representation. Brando's journey from casually donning yellowface to becoming an outspoken critic of Hollywood's treatment of indigenous people mirrors society's evolving understanding of cultural appropriation and authentic representation. The Tea House of the August Moon was adapted from a Pulitzer Prize-winning play and was intended as a gentle comedy about cultural differences during the American occupation of Okinawa. Critics at the time praised Brando's performance for its sensitivity, highlighting just how different the standards were just a few generations ago. 4. Louise Rayner as Olan in The Good Earth. When German-born actress Louise Rayner won the Academy Award for playing Olan, a Chinese farmer's wife in The Good Earth, 1937, it wasn't just an individual achievement, it was a systemic endorsement of yellowface at the highest levels of the film industry. With tape to alter her eye shape and darkened skin, Rayner's transformation was celebrated as a triumph of acting and makeup artistry. Her Oscar win, her second consecutive statuette, established a precedent that would influence casting decisions for decades to come. But there's a heartbreaking side to this story that rarely gets told. Anna May Wong, the leading Chinese-American actress of the era, had hoped to play Olan. The role seemed perfect for her. Finally, a sympathetic Central Chinese character in a major Hollywood production, yet she was ultimately passed over. The official reason was that since the male lead, Wong Lung, was being played by white actor Paul Mooney, anti-miscegenation sentiments and the production code prevented Wong from playing his wife, even though both characters were Chinese. Instead of recasting both roles with Chinese actors, MGM gave Olan to Rayner and offered Wong the role of Lotus, a manipulative concubine. Wong refused, saying, "You're asking me, with Chinese blood, to do the only unsympathetic role in the picture, featuring an all-American cast portraying Chinese characters." Her principled stand cost her what could have been a career-defining role, while Rayner's yellowface performance was rewarded with cinema's highest honor. This painful episode reveals the cruel irony at the heart of Hollywood's racial politics. A film celebrated for its sympathetic portrayal of Chinese characters systematically excluded actual Chinese actors from telling their own stories. 5. Natalie Wood as Maria in West Side Story. West Side Story, 1961, is beloved for its groundbreaking choreography, Leonard Bernstein's unforgettable score, and its powerful message about the destructive nature of prejudice. Yet this film about racial tensions and forbidden love across ethnic boundaries cast the Russian-American Natalie Wood as Maria, a Puerto Rican teenager. While Wood's makeup was less exaggerated than some other examples on our list, her casting still represents a fundamental contradiction at the heart of the production. Here was a film explicitly condemning discrimination, yet behind the scenes, it perpetuated the very practices it seemed to critique. What many viewers don't realize is that Wood's singing voice was actually dubbed by Marni Nixon, making her portrayal of Maria even further removed from authenticity. Meanwhile, the Puerto Rican actress Rita Moreno, who played Anita and won an Oscar for the role, had her own singing voice partially dubbed by Betty Wand, a white voice actress. These layers of substitution reveal how the film industry managed authenticity, selectively embracing it when convenient, discarding it when not. The role of Maria could have been a breakthrough opportunity for a Latina actress, especially since the film deals directly with the Puerto Rican immigrant experience in New York. Instead, the production followed the standard Hollywood practice of casting an established white star, while allowing a Latina actress to shine only in a supporting role. When West Side Story was remade by Steven Spielberg in 2021, the production made a specific commitment to authentic casting, with Colombian-American actress Rachel Zegler playing Maria. This recasting 60 years later represents a tacit acknowledgement of the original film's shortcomings shortcomings, even as the 1961 version remains beloved. 6. Alec Guinness, Prince Faisal in Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia, 1962, is consistently ranked among the greatest films ever made. Praised for its sweeping cinematography, complex protagonist, and nuanced portrayal of the Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire. Yet even this masterpiece of cinema wasn't immune to Hollywood's cross-racial casting practices. British actor Alec Guinness portrayed the Arab Prince Faisal with darkened skin, a false beard, and an affected accent. What makes this example particularly interesting is that the film did feature actual Arab actors in some roles, including Omar Sharif in his breakthrough performance as Sheriff Ali. Yet the more senior role of Prince Faisal, a sophisticated, educated leader who would go on to become King of Iraq and then Saudi Arabia, was reserved for an established white actor. This casting choice reflects a hierarchical approach that was common in Hollywood. Arab actors could play supporting characters, but the more complex authoritative roles still went to white performers. It's a pattern that reveals how even films considered progressive for their time still operated within certain racial boundaries. Guinness was known for his remarkable ability to transform himself for roles, and his performance as Prince Faisal is subtle compared to many other examples of cross-racial casting. Yet this subtlety almost makes the practice more insidious. By making these portrayals seem respectful and sophisticated, films like Lawrence of Arabia helped legitimize the practice of white actors playing characters of color, even in prestige productions. The real Prince Faisal was a sophisticated, educated leader who spoke multiple languages and would go on to become one of the most significant political figures in the modern Middle East. By casting Guinness rather than an Arab actor, the film missed an opportunity to present a more authentic portrayal of this important historical figure. 7. Jennifer Jones as Pearl Chavez in Duel in the Sun. In 1946's Duel in the Sun, Jennifer Jones played Pearl Chavez, a half-Native American woman, wearing dark makeup and revealing costumes that played into stereotypes about exotic women. The film was produced by David O. Selznick, who hoped to replicate the success of Gone with the Wind. Jones received an Academy Award nomination for her performance, again demonstrating how these portrayals weren't just accepted, but celebrated at the highest levels of the industry. The film was one of the highest grossing of the 1940s, nicknamed Lust in the Dust for its sensationalized portrayal of Pearl's sexuality. The film's marketing heavily emphasized Jones's transformation, with publicity materials highlighting the contrast between the actress's fair, all-American appearance and her darkened skin and revealing costumes as Pearl. This before and after presentation treated racial identity as something that could be put on and taken off like a costume, a fundamentally dehumanizing perspective. Duel in the Sun was actually controversial upon release, but primarily for its sexual content rather than its racial politics. Jones's portrayal of Pearl Chavez as a sexually uninhibited half-breed played directly into long-standing stereotypes about mixed-race women being exotic and dangerous, tropes that had existed in American culture since the 19th century. Selznick's production notes reveal that he was primarily concerned with making Pearl exotic and sensual rather than culturally authentic. He instructed the makeup department to make Jones look like a half-breed, but ensure she remained attractive, reflecting how these portrayals were designed to titillate white audiences rather than represent actual Native American women. As we continue our exploration, it becomes increasingly clear that these weren't isolated incidents, but rather part of a systemic pattern that shaped how Americans viewed people of different races and ethnicities. The stakes were much higher than just questionable entertainment. These portrayals had real-world consequences. 8. Burt Lancaster as Maasai in Apache. Burt Lancaster portrayed Maasai, one of the last Apache warriors to resist U.S. government forces, in the 1954 Western Apache. With bronzed skin and a stoic demeanor, Lancaster embodied Hollywood's typical approach to Native American characters. What makes Apache particularly interesting is that it was marketed as a progressive film for its time, attempting to present a sympathetic portrayal of Native American resistance to white encroachment. Lancaster himself was politically progressive, and likely saw the role as an opportunity to counter stereotypes, yet by modern standards, his casting and performance still perpetuated problematic patterns. The film presents Maasai as a lone hero hero fighting against injustice, which was a departure from the standard savage portrayal of Native Americans in most westerns of the time. Yet by casting Lancaster, rather than a Native American actor, the production reinforced the idea that Native stories could only be commercially viable when filtered through white performers. This contradiction, a film sympathetic to Native American resistance that nevertheless denies Native Americans the opportunity to portray their own experiences, epitomizes Hollywood's half-hearted approach to inclusivity during this era. It reflects a system willing to appropriate Native American stories while still excluding Native American performers. The real Maasai was a complex historical figure whose resistance represented the final chapter in the Apache Wars. By transforming his story into a vehicle for a white star, Hollywood continued its long tradition of rewriting Native American history to suit its own purposes, a practice that had tangible effects on public perception and policy toward indigenous communities. 9. Judy Garland and the minstrel tradition. Judy Garland's role in A Star is Born, 1954, might seem out of place on this list, since her character, Esther Blodgett, Vicky Lester, wasn't of a different race. However, the film includes a revealing example of how casually Hollywood incorporated racial caricatures even in prestigious productions. In the Born in a Trunk sequence, Garland performs a minstrel show segment in blackface, a moment that's often edited out of modern presentations of the film. This isn't the only example from Garland's career. She also appeared in blackface in earlier films like Everybody Sing, 1938, and Babes in Arms, 1939. These performances reflect how deeply embedded racist entertainment traditions were in American culture. Blackface minstrelsy wasn't viewed as a controversial practice, but rather as a standard entertainment form, no different from other musical styles. This casual inclusion in prestige productions like A Star is Born reveals how normalized these racial performances remained even into the 1950s. What makes these examples particularly worth examining is that they reveal how white performers could temporarily try on blackness for entertainment value, then return to their privileged white identities. This practice has deep roots in American entertainment, from minstrel shows of the 19th century through vaudeville and early Hollywood, and Garland's performances show how it persisted even in supposedly sophisticated productions of the mid-20th century. The presence of these blackface performances in Garland's filmography, an actress remembered for her emotional vulnerability and beloved by generations of fans, demonstrates how even the most sympathetic performers participated in practices we now recognize as harmful. It's a reminder that these weren't just the actions of a few insensitive individuals, but rather reflections of deeply entrenched cultural attitudes. 10. Paul Mooney as Wong in the Good Earth. Paul Mooney, born Friedrich Mechelem Meyer, Waisenfreund to Austrian Jewish parents, portrayed Wong Lung, the Chinese farmer protagonist of The Good Earth, 1937. Mooney was known for his complete transformations into his characters, and his portrayal of Wong was no exception. He underwent hours of makeup to alter his appearance. What's particularly notable is that The Good Earth was celebrated for its supposedly authentic portrayal of Chinese rural life. The production designers and researchers went to great lengths to recreate Chinese farming methods and village life accurately. Yet this commitment to authenticity apparently didn't extend to casting actual Chinese actors in the leading roles. MGM did hire a Chinese-American artist, Key Luke, as a technical advisor to help the white actors with their performances. Luke later recalled teaching Mooney how to use chopsticks and advising him on Chinese mannerisms. This strange dynamic, having actual Chinese Americans train white actors to play Chinese characters, perfectly encapsulates Hollywood's approach to racial representation during this era. Mooney's dedication to the role was legendary. He reportedly spent months studying Chinese farming techniques and cultural practices. Yet this commitment to research couldn't overcome the fundamental inauthenticity of having a European Jewish actor portray a Chinese farmer. No matter how diligent his preparation, Mooney could only offer an outsider's interpretation of Chinese experience. This casting choice had real consequences beyond the film itself. By denying Chinese actors the opportunity to play leading roles even in stories specifically about Chinese life, Hollywood reinforced a hierarchy where white performers were considered the only viable box office draws regardless of the story being told. 11. Lena Horne and the roles she didn't get. Let's take a different approach with this entry. Lena Horne, a groundbreaking African-American performer, repeatedly saw roles that could have been hers go to white actresses in darkened makeup. Most famously, she was passed over for the role of Julie Laverne in Showboat, 1951, which went to Ava Gardner, who wore darker makeup to play a mixed-race character. Horne was under contract with MGM, but found herself mostly limited to musical performances that could be cut when the films were shown in southern states. Meanwhile, white actresses like Gardner, Jean Crane, and Susan Kohner were cast as mixed-race characters in films like Showboat, Pinky, and Imitation representation of life. This example highlights the double standard at work in Hollywood. While white actors could play characters of any race, talented black performers like Horne were restricted even from playing roles that matched their own racial identity. This wasn't just about individual casting decisions, but about systemic inequities in how opportunities were distributed. Horne's treatment by Hollywood studios illustrates how racism operated on multiple levels within the industry. Not only were black actresses denied roles that went to white performers in makeup, but the roles they did get were often designed to be expendable. Horne typically appeared in isolated musical numbers that could be easily removed when films were screened in segregated Southern theaters, making her essentially invisible to a significant portion of the American audience. In a 1980 interview, Horne reflected on this practice. "They didn't make me into a maid, but they didn't make me anything else either. I became a butterfly pinned to a column, singing away in movie land." This poignant description captures how even a performer of Horne's exceptional talent and beauty was marginalized by a system that couldn't imagine black women as central characters in their own stories. 12. Yul Brynner as the King of Siam in The King and I. Russian-born Yul Brynner won an Academy Award for playing King Mongkut of Siam, now Thailand, in The King and I, 1956. What makes Brynner an interesting case is that he often claimed to have Mongol ancestry from his father's side, though biographers have questioned this assertion. Brynner's ethnically ambiguous appearance made him Hollywood's go-to actor for a variety of exotic roles. Beyond The King of Siam, he played a Cossack chief, an Egyptian pharaoh, a Sioux chief, a Japanese criminal, and various other non-white characters throughout his career. This ambiguity extended to Brynner's personal mythology. Throughout his career, he gave contradictory accounts of his background, sometimes claiming Swiss, Japanese, or Romani heritage. This deliberate mystification of his origins suggests that Brynner understood the professional advantage of being perceived as ethnically unclear. It allowed him access to a broader range of roles than either white or non-white actors typically enjoyed. The King and I remains a beloved musical classic, with Brynner's portrayal of King Mongkut becoming his signature role. He performed it more than 4,600 times on stage in addition to the film version. Yet the real King Mongkut was a sophisticated, educated monarch who spoke multiple languages and modernized Siam, quite different from the more primitive character portrayed in the musical. The Thai government actually banned The King and I due to its portrayal of King Mongkut as a backward, uncivilized figure, a stark contrast to the historical king, who was a Buddhist monk and scholar before ascending to the throne. This ban remains in effect today, highlighting how these Hollywood representations could distort historical figures and offend the very cultures they purported to represent. 13. Boris Karloff as Fu Manchu. Boris Karloff, the British actor famous for playing Frankenstein's monster, portrayed the villainous Dr. Fu Manchu in The Mask of Fu Manchu, 1932. With exaggerated makeup and costuming, Karloff embodied one of the most notorious Asian stereotypes in popular culture. Created by British author Sax Rohmer, Fu Manchu represented the racist concept of the Yellow Peril, the fear of East Asian dominance that pervaded Western society in the early 20th century. The character was designed to embody Western anxieties about the East. The Mask of Fu Manchu was considered shocking even in its own time for its racist content, with the Chinese embassy formally protesting the film. Yet it didn't stop Hollywood from continuing to produce Fu Manchu films for decades to come, with various white actors taking on the role. Karloff's portrayal is particularly significant because it came at a time when anti-Asian sentiment was being actively stoked in American society. The Chinese Exclusion Act was still in effect, prohibiting Chinese immigration to the United States. Films like The Mask of Fu Manchu helped justify these discriminatory policies by portraying Asians as devious, cruel, and fundamentally opposed to Western values. The film is remarkable for its overt racism, even by the standards of its time. One character explicitly urges, "Conquer and breed, kill the white man and take his women." Such dialogue reveals how these portrayals weren't just about entertainment, but were deeply intertwined with racial fears and sexual anxieties. MGM actually revised the film in later releases, cutting some of the most offensive dialogue and scenes. This unusual step for the era suggests that even contemporary audiences found aspects of the film excessive. Yet the fundamental premise, a white actor portraying an Asian villain bent on world domination, remained intact and continued to influence popular perceptions of Asian people. 14. John Wayne as Genghis Khan in The Conqueror. Perhaps the most incongruous example on our list is John Wayne, the quintessential American cowboy, playing Genghis Khan in The Conqueror, 1956. With dark makeup, eye prosthetics, and a mustache, Wayne made no attempt to alter his distinctive drawl while playing the Mongolian emperor. The Conqueror is often cited as one of the worst casting decisions in Hollywood history, with Wayne's performance widely ridiculed. The film has a tragic Titanic legacy beyond its artistic failings, it was shot downwind from nuclear test sites in Utah, and many cast and crew members, including Wayne himself, later died of cancer, possibly due to radiation exposure. Producer Howard Hughes was reportedly so embarrassed by the film that he paid $12 million to buy up all copies of it and kept it out of circulation for many years. Yet even this attempt to bury the film couldn't erase its impact on how Mongolian history and culture were perceived by American audiences. Wayne himself seems to have recognized the miscasting, later saying in an interview, "I think the way to make pictures is to let the actors play the parts they were born to play." This statement takes on an unintentional irony when considering his role as Genghis Khan, a part for which he was manifestly not born to play. The film's dialogue includes such unintentionally comical lines as Wayne declaring, "I am Temujin, the Conqueror," in his unmistakable Western drawl. The screenplay attempts to blend Mongolian history with Western romantic conventions, resulting in a bizarre cultural hybrid that serves neither tradition well. Wayne's Khan is essentially a cowboy in exotic dress, highlighting how Hollywood often simply projected American archetypes onto other cultures rather than attempting to understand them on their own terms. 15. Jeanne Crain as Pinky in Pinky. Jeanne Crain, a white actress, played the title role in Pinky, 1949, a film about a light-skinned black woman who passes for white. Crain received an Academy Award nomination for the role, which was originally intended for Lena Horne before studio executives decided the subject matter was too controversial for a black actress to play. Pinky was considered a progressive film for its time, tackling themes of racial prejudice and identity. Director Elia Kazan later expressed regret about not casting a black actress in the lead role, acknowledging that it undermined the film's message. The film's central theme, passing as white in a racist society, makes the casting decision particularly problematic. By having a white actress play a character who could pass for white, the film inadvertently reinforced the very racial hierarchies it sought to critique. The audience was never required to truly confront their biases, because Pinky was always, literally, a white woman beneath the surface. Darryl F. Zanuck, the head of 20th Century Fox, reportedly pushed for the film as part of a series of message pictures addressing social issues. Yet his insistence on casting Crain rather than a black actress reveals the limits of Hollywood's progressivism. Even those who saw themselves as allies were often unwilling to challenge the system's fundamental assumptions about who could carry a major studio film. Ethel Waters, who played Pinky's grandmother in the film, later wrote in her autobiography that she had hoped Lena Horne would get the title role. Waters, a black actress with a distinguished career, found herself in the painful position of supporting a white actress playing a role that should have gone to a black performer, a situation that exemplifies the compromises black performers often had to make to work within the studio system. 16. Ricardo Montalban and the roles he played. Mexican-born actor Ricardo Montalban presents an interesting case in our examination. While he was Latino, Hollywood frequently cast him as characters of various other ethnicities. He played Native Americans in Across the Wide Missouri, Japanese in Sayonara, and Egyptians in Let No Man Write My Epitaph. This demonstrates how Hollywood often flattened distinct racial and ethnic identities, treating non-white actors as interchangeable regardless of their specific heritage. Montalban himself noted this phenomenon, saying in interviews that he played Indians, Polynesians, Mexicans, you name it, throughout his career. Montalban's experience highlights an important aspect of Hollywood's racial politics, the creation of a racial hierarchy where white actors could play any role, while actors of color were restricted to playing either their own specific ethnicity or serving as generic ethnic performers who could be cast as any non-white character. This system created very different career trajectories for white and non-white actors. The actor spoke candidly about these challenges in his later years, recalling how he was initially advised to change his name to something that sounded less ethnic. He refused, maintaining his identity as Ricardo Montalban rather than adopting an anglicized stage name. This small act of resistance represented a significant choice at a time when many performers felt compelled to hide or minimize their ethnic backgrounds. Montalban eventually founded Nosotros, an advocacy group for Latino performers, in part to combat these practices and create more authentic opportunities for Hispanic actors. His career illustrates both the challenges faced by non-white performers and the ways they sometimes had to participate in problematic casting to maintain a career in Hollywood. 17. Shirley Temple as an orphan in Stowaway. Our final example takes a slightly different approach. In Stowaway, 1936, child star Shirley Temple played an orphan who is rescued in China and adopted by a wealthy American. In one scene, Temple performs toy trumpet in yellowface makeup, affecting an exaggerated Chinese accent and mannerisms. What makes this example particularly disturbing is that it indoctrinated child audiences into accepting these racial caricatures, presenting them as innocent entertainment. Temple's immense popularity meant that millions of children watched and potentially internalized these performances. This wasn't Temple's only racially problematic performance. She also performed in blackface in The Littlest Rebel and other films. These examples show how pervasive these practices were, extending even to entertainment specifically created for children. Temple's performances highlight how racial caricatures were normalized for even the youngest audiences. Children watching these films would absorb the message that it was acceptable, even cute and entertaining, to mimic and mock people of different races. This early exposure to stereotyped representations helped perpetuate racial prejudices across generations. The framing of these performances as innocent children's entertainment made them particularly insidious. When America's most beloved child star engaged in these caricatures, it gave them a stamp of wholesomeness and acceptability. Parents who might have objected to more overtly racist content in adult films could find themselves unwittingly exposing their children to harmful stereotypes wrapped in the package of family-friendly entertainment. Now here's the twist that might change how you think about this entire issue. While we've been focusing on the stars who played these roles, the real story isn't just about the actors, it's about the system that made these casting choices inevitable. Many of these performers were products of their time, operating within a studio system that made all the decisions. Some, like Marlon Brando and Elia Kazan, later expressed regret about their participation in these practices. Others, like Mickey Rooney, defended their performances for decades before eventually acknowledging their harmful nature. But what's truly revealing is that there were always alternative possibilities. Anna May Wong could have played Olan in The Good Earth. Lena Horne could have played Julie in Showboat. Native American actors could have portrayed Native American characters. These weren't impossibilities, they were choices deliberately not made by a system that prioritized white performers regardless of the story being told. And perhaps most surprisingly, there were always voices of protest, even at the time. The Chinese government formally objected to The Mask of Fu Manchu. The NAACP regularly criticized Hollywood's racial portrayals. Actors like Anna May Wong spoke out about the limitations placed on performers of color. These weren't modern sensibilities retroactively imposed on the past. They were contemporaneous objections that were systematically ignored or marginalized by the power structures of the day. Understanding this history helps us recognize that progress doesn't happen automatically. It requires sustained pressure and advocacy. The changes we've seen in Hollywood casting practices over the decades didn't occur naturally, but came about because of the tireless efforts of those who recognized these injustices and worked to correct them. We began this journey by asking what happens when we pull back the curtain on Hollywood's most celebrated stars and examine the racial masquerades that helped build their legendary careers. What we've discovered is a complex legacy that reveals as much about American society as it does about the film industry itself. From Katharine Hepburn's Chinese Peasant to John Wayne's Genghis Khan, these performances weren't just artistic choices. They were reflections of a system that reserved storytelling power for white performers while denying authentic opportunities to actors of color. Each time a white actor was cast to play a character of a different race, a door was closed for a performer from that background. And yet, understanding this history doesn't mean we must discard classic cinema entirely. Rather, it allows us to view these works with greater context and awareness, to appreciate their artistic achievements while acknowledging their shortcomings. It helps us recognize how far we've come while reminding us of how far we still have to go. Most importantly, examining this aspect of Hollywood's past helps us become more discerning viewers of today's media. The casting choices in the films we watch now will someday be judged by future generations, just as we're evaluating those of the Golden Age. By understanding this history, we can better recognize and support authentic representation in contemporary entertainment. So the next time you watch a classic film from Hollywood's Golden Age, remember the stories behind the performances, both the ones you see on screen and the ones that never had the chance to be told. Because in understanding this complicated legacy, we gain a deeper appreciation not just of cinema history, but of the ongoing struggle for authentic representation that continues to this day. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood history, don't forget to hit that like button, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more content exploring the fascinating stories of classic cinema. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below below about which of these performances surprised you the most, or if there are other examples you think should have made the list. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video exploring the golden age of Hollywood.